The Dice Tower, episode 621. Player counts. Nope.
The Dice Tower is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. This episode is sponsored by Renegade Game Studios. Welcome to The Dice Tower, a podcast about board games and card games, and especially the people who play them.
In today's show, Mandy reviews a heavier game, I do a little role-playing, and we talk about a couple of one-and-dones and get your input on player counts for games in our Victory Points segment. I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandy Hutchinson.
And Mandy, I'm very excited because I have a 2-player game night tonight.
Ooh, oh.
I don't know, is it hard for you to get 2-player games to the table sometimes?
Yes, it's funny because I always thought it would be easier, but it's actually harder because lately I've had an influx in my game group of more people. So 2-player games, I actually have to schedule them like what you're doing to get them played.
Which, exactly right. I scheduled that. And so I'm pretty excited because there are some great 2-player games out that I'm looking forward to trying. And I was thinking about that. It also means that I realize I don't get to play a ton of our bigger games at that lower player count too, which I was thinking about that in terms of our Victory Point segment that we've got coming in a little bit.
I know. I was about to say, so are your games you're playing, are they actually 2-player or... Oh, wait. Maybe we're going to get into that later, actually, this whole player count thing.
We can talk about that
later.
Oh, okay. I'm excited for game night. And I'm starting to stress out because I mentioned earlier in our last episode together that I've got PAX West coming up. And I've got that tabletop meets digital panel that I'm on.
So exciting.
On Sunday, September 1st in the afternoon. And it's exciting, but I'm getting pretty darn nervous about it. So we'll see how that goes. But it's exciting because they've just announced, too, for PAX West that they've moved the analog gaming section to the Hyatt. And I guess there's 3 different Hyatts, so it's moved to one of the
three.
But I think the intent is that the space is bigger and just more amenable to tabletop gamers. So I'm really excited about that because I know in the past it's been a little frustrating for some people who have tended just to play analog games. So I'm looking forward to checking that out this upcoming weekend from the time this episode airs, this upcoming weekend. Anyway.
Do you love it? You're like, yeah, it's in a few weeks. No, more like next week.
More like now. Okay, I'm totally prepared.
Exactly.
Totally prepared. How's your game playing been going?
Oh my goodness. I have been playing so many games. Listen,
It seems like it. I'm seeing all this stuff from you.
I'm on a schedule. So I did a spreadsheet. If you see the spreadsheet that I've created of games on my shelf that I've purchased and haven't played, I've also made a nice
spreadsheet.
I made a spreadsheet, and then I made a spreadsheet that for my review copy. So when I receive them, when they need to be reviewed. Oh no, I have a color system going on, and I'd been slacking a bit, so now I just had to update it. And then I have a listing of all my regular games because I lend games out, so it's like a little library checklist as well, so I can keep track of what's coming in and out.
I am in awe of your organizational capabilities. Wow.
So all that to say, I have been playing a ton of games. My friends have been amazing because I'm like, okay, we're playing this. I even give them homework. So when you leave tonight, you're going to grab a game off of this shelf, which I've organized by publisher, by the way. So shelf 1 is here, shelf 2 is here. So I know exactly where it is in my little spreadsheet. And so everybody has homework. The next time we come, they all have one game that they've read the rules and can teach. Yeah, I'm bossy, I guess, a little bit, but they all love games, so they don't notice.
I just think you're organized. I love that teamwork approach. In fact, the other night we had a game night and we opened it up and everybody who was there got a rule book and we were all sitting there reading a rule book. And maybe not the most exciting thing, but certainly I think that what this says is that the unspoken heroes of any kind of board game content or review show are the play groups that put up with the intense game playing demands of the content. So bless them all.
Yes, I do a little whoop whoop, raise the roof, as my mom would say.
Oh my God. Is it 2005? What the heck just happened here?
I know, I took a turn into Cornyville, but that's okay, because it was cute.
Mandy, anybody who knows you knows that you're a permanent resident in Cornyville. Let's face it. Come on now.
I know, right? I didn't take a left. I reside there. But anyway.
Okay, well then you have this massive spreadsheet and this backlog of games. And I think we're headed into convention season, obviously with Gen Con occurring. And I know I have a lot of games from Gen Con, and I just got games in prep for Essen from some Asian publishers as well that I'm really excited for. What if we got some help prioritizing?
Yes. I had a little chat about this, so I hope you don't mind. I mean, I think, you've put some in as well, but I put a little list of a few games that I've at least played once, had an idea, but maybe people might want to, hear about something earlier than others. I just have so many. I just never know what people want to hear about. So would you be okay if I shared a few, and then you all can kind of let us know which one you'd like to hear about on the next podcast? Would that be cool?
Yeah, drop it. Like, let's hear what you've got, and I'll throw some in too, and we'll see what people say.
All right, so this was a surprise. The first one just showed up at my house, and I was like, oh, what's this? Yeah, I'm sorry. I totally judge it by its cover, and the cover was actually kind of cute. I just knew nothing about it. Skulk Hollow. So I played it once, kind of excited. So, so Skulk Hollow, 2-player game. Skulk Hollow is from Pencil First Games, so I should probably shout out to the publishers there. Parks is, I can't remember the publisher of this one.
Keymaster.
Thank you. So that one I've played, very pretty, but that's on the list. Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North. I had never played the original. I'd only played 51st State, which was in comparison. I've told was similar. So I played one game of Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, so that's one that I've heard people talk about. Are you interested in hearing what I think about it early? So I could definitely talk about that. Snowdonia! That's a huge one, and I've played that one, so that was a Kickstarter, so I'm hoping to get that to the table again. So is that something that you're interested in? And Funkoverse. Funkoverse, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I played one game of it already with... very entertaining and rousing round with Harry Potter characters and the Golden Girls. So I have my Batman pack here with Harley Quinn, so I want to try that out. But is that something that people are interested in hearing about a little bit more? So that's the list. Skulk Hollow, Parks, Imperial Settlers, Empires of the North, Snowdonia, and Funkoverse. So let me know. Hit me up with an email. We'll give you all that information at the end of the show. Or hit me up on social media.
Alrighty. And on my list, I've got Undaunted from Osprey Games. I've got Watergate from Capstone Games. I mentioned I have a bunch, 4 or 5 new games from Taiwan Board Game Design, like Electropolis or Soloween, which, Mandy, might be your thing. It's got the Halloween thing going on.
Soloween, I like it.
Mega City Oceana from Hub Games.
I want to hear about that one.
Okay. And Tal der Vikinger, which is the Spiel the Kinder, the kids, the young player, Spiel des Jahres winner from Haba Games. So those are all on my docket to check out soon, and be interested to see if anybody is particularly interested in one of those over another.
Yeah.
But for today, I know you've got games to talk about. I know I've got games to talk about.
So many games.
Let's do it.
So, what have you been playing lately?
All right. Games played. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited. I've been playing all the games. But before we jump into, the games we talked about that we played, well, I played some other games, but I can't talk about it now, but we'll talk about them later.
What is happening right now?
I'm having a moment. It's like my brain is just like going faster and my mouth is not, it's a thing. Okay. So yeah, if you jumped into the episode right now, you're probably having regrets. Let's just take it back. So I'm excited because I don't get to play legacy games very often.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
2 have approached my table more than once. So I have 2 groups going right now. One for Clank Legacy V Acquisitions. What is it? Acquisitions Incorporated?
Incorporated, yeah.
Yes, and that's the legacy game for Clank, so that's with Renegade Game Studios. So I've had 2 games of that one. And then The King's Dilemma, which is from Horrible Games. And I won't go into too much detail because Suzanne is also playing Clank Legacy, but we're thinking we'll do a little like non-spoiler, like, hey, how's the game going over the next few podcasts. So if everyone's cool with that, we're just going to kind of shelve it for now, but just to kind of say, hey, Mandy's playing that, so what did you think? And Suzanne's playing Clank, so we'll have some more thoughts for you going forward. All right. all of that now. We talked about Clank Legacy and the King's Dilemma. Well, let's take a turn to Era, Medieval Age. Designed by Matt Leacock, artist is Chris Williams, and published by Eggertspiel. So this game plays, it's 1 to 4 players. It plays in about 45 to 60 minutes, and it has a price of approximately 94 Canadian, which is currently on pre-order, and $70 US. I don't know if it's on pre-order in the US, but I know in Canada it is not currently available. So for those who are not familiar, the costs that I'm quoting here are from online retailers. The Canadian prices are taken from Board Game Bliss, and the American prices are taken from Cool Stuff Inc. Okay, just to give you an idea. So Era Medieval Age. So apparently I've been told it's like a successor to Roll Through the Ages.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to say this. Don't at me. I have never played Roll Through the Ages. I know.
That's okay.
Oh, no. You don't understand. I'm going to hear about this. So, Hey, Ottawa people, if someone wants to teach it to me, I'm willing to learn. So, there you go. So, Era, I'm just going to call it Era for short for right now. It's a roll and build. So I was like, this is cool. We get to build things. In Era, you have dice, which kind of represent your workers, and you also have buildings that you want to kind of put in your enclosed wall area. You're like, well, who cares? Why don't you just put it randomly on your board? No. Having your buildings enclosed with your nice wall makes it protected, and, well, gives you double points for the most part. So, and some other bonus points happen, so this is the thing. But before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to win. Winning can be difficult in this game. People go really big on their boards, building walls, making all these buildings, not realizing that you have to enclose it. And you also want to try and get your buildings in where sometimes certain buildings have to be touching other buildings, like if disease breaks out, hey-oh, you want to be near a hospital. So things like that you have to consider. And the shapes are very interesting to play. So if you're like me and have difficulty with spatial kind of things, you'll get used to it, but you really have to kind of plan that out. Jumping into Era. And you've played this, Suzanne, have you not? Or once?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, great. So if I miss anything, you can tell me. What you're going to start off with in the game, you have this board, which we will talk about later. And this is where you're going to be, building all the things, all right? And tracking, there's a little peg that you get to track. These are the phases that we're going through. You also get a screen that you're going to be able to cover your board and kind of dice when you're rolling them, because you don't want people to see what you're rolling. And you start with a certain amount of dice. I think it's a few yellow dice and a gray die. They are a bit different on what's on the dice. I think the gray die has like the shields and the swords, and it also has like build actions. The yellow has more food to feed your workers, which are your dice, and a few other things. Some skulls, which are disasters. We'll talk about those soon. But these are things that you can end up rolling, but you can also acquire more dice as the game progresses. And this is done by building certain buildings. First things first. You're going to have your board and you're going to be able to set your keep, which looks like a little tower in the middle of the board, and you kind of have a little setup with a farm, and I think you get a few longhouses that you get to place before the game starts. No one sees you doing that. That's secret. Then when you start, you're going to roll your dice, okay? And the player who's kind of in charge for that round is tracking and guiding you through what to do here. So you roll the dice behind your screen. Now, you get to roll a few times. I think it's 3 if I'm not mistaken. However, if you roll any skulls, no, you leave those skulls right where they are. Yes, they spell disaster. Literally spell disaster. So, we don't get to reroll those unless you have specific dice that allow you to do so. Okay, so at this point, you wouldn't have that. Then you've rolled your dice, voila, reveal the dice you've rolled, and now this is where you're going to kind of action them. So, if you have resources, you're now going to mark those resources on your board, and that's in food. I think it's food, wood, stone. I forget what the little chest is, but there's
treasure or something.
Treasure or something, yeah. And then there's also, is it knowledge or something to that effect? And then there's a disaster track. So knowledge is great, gives you points. Disaster track, not so much, takes away points. So after you've rolled your dice, taken all your resources, you got to feed your workers, being your dice. So like I said before, certain buildings are going to give you dice once you've built them. So you start off with 4 dice, you may end up with 5 or 6. You have to feed them 1 food per. If you can't feed them, well, that's a problem. You're going to get some disaster points, which are negative points. After you fed them, then you have, and I might have the order a little mixed up here, but I think from this point here, is it checking the swords or is it disasters? Do you remember? I'm not sure.
Remember?
Okay,
these order. I don't think.
Yes, I don't remember the order, but these are the things you're going to check in the game. But basically, you want to see who is protected. So whoever has shields will be protected from other players who have swords on their dice that they've rolled. The person who's rolled swords, you want to look around and say, do I have the most or more than other players? And for every other player that has less than you, they have to give you a resource. Well, they could also choose not to, but then they lose points for doing so. So most likely you're going to get your resource. Then there's also your disasters, and those are the skulls. Now, depending on the amount of skulls you have, great. You are potentially going to lose some points, or wait for it, you may make other people mess up their board by providing them with some nice scorched areas outside of their walled area. Not so good, because you may destroy buildings that are not in your walled area, and, well, players are not going to like that. I have a story about that. We'll wait till after. It involves Jason, so there's a whole thing there. Oh, yeah. Well, we're going to talk. So after that, you get to build, and this is where, depending on the resources you have, you get to build the different buildings. And like I said, different buildings do different things, potentially extra points at the end of the game, giving you an extra die for the game, these sorts of things. And keeping in mind, if a building gets destroyed, that die is also gone as well, and it's out of the game. Something to note, end game can be triggered. We have these tokens depending on player count, how many are available, and they're kind of flipped on the white side. As soon as a building is no longer available, so there's none left, that token flips up, and that tells you, we're getting closer to game end. And when you flipped all of them up, so basically a certain number of buildings are gone, the game will end. But in a round, these are the things that we're doing.
Yeah.
The things I've described previously. So after you've done your build, then basically we do it all over again. Place it on your board, and then we do it all over again until that end condition is met, as I was saying before. Whew, okay. That was a lot. And the first round, you're like, that was a lot. And then you play it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this makes sense. It's just strategically placing the things. The first time I played this game, I played with Jason. Now, he had played this game 4, 5, 6, 7, 20 times before. And,
oh, dear.
And all of us had never played it.
Oh, dear.
I think you know where this is going.
Yeah.
So my first experience, I was not a happy camper because Jason was scorching everybody. And
yeah, he doesn't hold back.
Well, this is it. At least let us figure out the game before you just scorch everyone. And I told him that's it. No more scorching. Let us learn it. Then you can scorch as much as you want.
Right,
so,
right.
So that was the thing. So for me, that is something if you have an experienced player and other players are not knowing the game, you're going to have someone who drives that strategy, and unfortunately it does affect everyone. So that's something to consider. I mean, it's a game, right? You got to strategize, but just to be forewarned. Aesthetically looking at this game, I have to tell you, I did not love the board where you place your buildings.
Yeah.
I know you and I, what did you think about it?
The board is the thing I dislike about the game the most.
Right.
It's yellow. It's this pale yellow. That's a fine color on its own, but it is the board is very well made. It's plastic, and they have little impressions to indicate what the track is all around the place, which is great. It is 100% unreadable. And I mean, when I say unreadable, I had to lean down to the table and put my eyes right next to it at an angle and then wiggle around to get the right angle on this board to read what the track is. Mm-hmm. And it created enough frustration during the gameplay that it impacted our enjoyment of the game.
Okay.
And that's when it becomes a problem. Every game has some kind of graphic design issue. It's the way it is. It's fine. It is what it is. But this one was impacting my ability to enjoy the game. And so it made me very frustrated. It is absolutely solvable. Put a little Sharpie in there, or if you're a fancy painter, paint it, put a wash on it, that kind of thing. I know some people have been painting them green so they look more like fields. My understanding is that they actually tried some green plastics and it didn't work as well as the yellow. The yellow is a very conscious decision on their part, but not a fan. I'm going to have to go over it for sure.
Yeah, I had a very adverse reaction to the yellow. I just didn't like the color, I'll be honest with you, but also I couldn't see. Okay, well, moving on from the board, let us talk about some other parts of the game. I actually really enjoyed this game. I found in the beginning, I was like, okay, I'm not really sure where this is going. And as I spoke about with Jason, it can be mean. I mean, you can take the strategy of just scorching the heck out of someone's or other players' area. Mm-hmm. And that's a strategy you can take. And it's viable, absolutely. So it does have that effect of where you can just be mean to other players. but you do still have to spend some time and kind of creating your closed kind of area so you can actually score. And choice of buildings, I mean, you want to be quick on the draw getting some of these buildings because depending on player count, you're limited. There may be only 2, or 3, and once it's gone, it's gone. One of the big things, too, is people are really big on doing buildings. I want lots of dice. You have to feed them. And you only go up to about 9, I think, food on the board.
Yeah.
So sometimes you get a little greedy. And sometimes rolling food is difficult. So you end up, not being able to, and then you're losing points. So, I mean, I like the fact that it makes you kind of think, okay, do I want to take all of these dice, but it's really good for me, but I could lose points? Do I want to take the strategy of being mean to other players? I mean, now you've just put a target on yourself because people are going to be like, whoa, you're coming after me, I'm going to come after you. Or do you keep working on your kind of area of the board? I think the board is a good enough size where it gives you enough room to think. Sometimes if you give somebody too large of an area, it kind of almost encourages you to be large and that you're never going to finish. This actually encourages you to work in a certain confine and you are able to finish it. Does that make sense? I don't know.
I appreciate that. Absolutely. Sometimes in a lot of things, limits are enablers in a weird way. I get that.
Right. Yeah, and I liked that. So overall, I really enjoyed the game. I like the way it played out. I don't have that comparison to Roll Through the Ages. I don't even know if it's the same. I know it's like more of a roll and write type game. I don't know if it's the same kind of premise. Suzanne, you might be able to speak more to that than I can. But for the game as it was, I actually really enjoyed it. And I've played it with 2 players. I've played it with 3. Like, I've played it at all the counts except for solo. And I found it went really well. I found with more players, it can get long. I think we were running into an hour and a half potentially at one point. And so I don't know if it's just people I don't think there was a lot of attacking things happening. So buildings and whatnot were still there. People were doing more wall building, I think. So long story short, I found I did like it at a lower player count myself. Like 2 was nice. I really liked 2, went really quick. 3 was nice. When it got to the higher player count, I did drag a little bit. But overall, I actually quite enjoyed the game. I mean, I hope they alter the board, but if you do end up getting it, you may want to kind of color it in so you can see it a little bit better. Something else to note, people are probably going to have a problem with the price.
Yeah.
It's expensive. Canadian, I think I said at the beginning of the show, it's in the $90 region. It has a lot of pieces. I get it. I just think people might balk at the price a little bit.
I understand that. And that has to do with the production. This box is stuffed with unique shaped buildings. And each color has a variety of building shapes associated with it. And that's expensive to produce. So
Absolutely.
I get the price, but I agree. Not everybody is going to want to pay that amount of money. In terms of comparing Era to Roll Through the Ages, I think it's more inspired by in some elements. In Roll Through the Ages, you get pegboards to track your resources. That's absolutely familiar and similar to Roll Through the Ages. But in Roll Through the Ages, you get these sheets where you're marking off progress on these little monuments. And you have to feed your people, and there's disasters. Those are very similar elements. But honestly, to me, Era is all about that spatial element. Some of the resource management, for sure. I definitely ran into things where you were hitting the top of the track and wasting resource and things like that, or not getting the resources you want. Had to deal with all that.
Yeah.
And I will just say, if you are not a spatial puzzle person, you are going to struggle hard on this game, without a doubt. But that's really what Era is about. It's about the stunning presentation, the toy factor of just fiddling and goofing off with these buildings, and then that spatial placement element. And that spatial element is completely different from Roll Through the Ages. So I see the inspiration, I see some of the mechanical commonalities, but it's a very, very different game. And I can see a scenario where people who like Roll Through the Ages will not enjoy Era because of that spatial element. And I can see the opposite being true as well, especially if you enjoy that puzzly element, which is something I typically enjoy in games. From a comparison point of view, that's my input there.
Okay, thank you, because I didn't know, so that's great to have that insight, so I'll have that when I play. And thank you for mentioning the resources. That was the one thing I did forget. Wood for me was always over, always, because I always get the lumber mill, and if you get one lumber mill, oh my goodness, you'll be over wood like the entire game. Something to note. I mean, it's never too bad to have more resources than you need. Anyway, I digress. Era, medieval age.
I, of course, have to talk about a roll and write whenever I have the opportunities. So today's roll and write is Cat Cafe. This is actually originally... I heard that, Mandy. This was actually originally published by Mandu Games in Asia, which, again, love seeing this pollination of Asian games spreading more. It's one of my favorite things to see. But it's being published in North America by Alley Cat Games. The designer is Lee Juwa, and unfortunately there's no artist credited, which is a shame because the kitties are adorable. Aww. This is a very straightforward dice drafting roll and write style game about optimizing cat towers in a cat cafe. Hello, adorable. Come on now. That is too cute. And if you're going to play a roll and write game, you might as well have a theme and cute little drawings to enjoy. Players roll dice. You do draft them. There's one left in the middle, and then the die that you drafted and the die in the middle are the ones that you have to work with. And you will use these dice in combination to determine what you get to draw and where you get to draw it. Because on each there's a little series of 5 cat towers, and they're different levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So you're going to use that die to determine what you get to draw, like a ball of yarn or a food bowl or a mouse. And then the other die will determine what level you draw it on. So if I have a 4-4, I'm going to draw a pillow, because that's what or something like that. A pillow on the level 4. Done. Really, really simple. And then each of those items scores differently. Yarn is a majority play. The more whoever has the most yarn in a cat tower will get more points. And mice are about connecting mice. The more mice you have adjacent to each other, the more you score. Pillows score based on what level you put them on. So a pillow on level 1 is 1 point. A pillow on level 5 is 5 points. That kind of thing. Again, very straightforward. There are cat houses. Cat houses score a little bit differently. When you draw a house, you get to mark off one of the items, and you will score 2 times the number of those. So let's say I draw a house, and I have 2 butterflies on my board. I can mark off butterflies, and I will get 4 points, 2 for each of those butterflies. And as you do houses, you just kind of tick those off. You can score by completing the towers, so the first person to complete a tower will get more points, and then everybody after. I see that a lot in roll and write games, and quite frankly, I like it. It incentivizes you to rush a space, but then you're not completely disincentivized if you're not first to do it. And I think that works well in roll and write games, and Cat Cafe has that as well. That's pretty much it. Dice drafting, writing on these little cat towers. When 3 cat towers are done on one player's sheet, game is over. Voila. It is light. I think that's great. It is a nice dice drafting game, and I like the flexibility. It's funny, one of our players in one game didn't understand you could interchange the die values you could choose, and they were playing a harder game. I'm like, no, you can do this. Oh, okay. I like that ability there. I like the way the different elements score. If you want to introduce dice drafting, I think this is a great game to do that with. The rulebook offers letters that you can write instead of drawing the items. So you can write a Y instead of drawing a yarn ball. But come on now, you get to draw a yarn. Like, why would you not draw the things? It's so charming to draw. You don't have to. Of course you don't have to. But games are for fun. And it's fun to draw. So, things like that. I will say, the dice in my copy, I don't know if it's a prototype thing or something, because the dice I've seen in other people's pictures aren't the same. The dice in my copy are not good. And I didn't notice the first time I played, but then a friend pointed out the second time, and they're like, did you notice these dice? And it looks like there's a different die underneath it, and it's got plastic wrap with new pips printed on it, but you can literally see under the 2, there's like a 3 underneath it. It's weird, and I'm hoping it's a prototype thing in my copy.
I was going to say, they sound a little janky.
I don't care, because they're standard D6s. I've got plenty of standard D6s in my collection to not have to worry about that. But the theme is adorable. The gameplay is light and entertaining. If you like roll and write games, does this do something totally different and revolutionary? No. Is it a fun, solid, entertaining, cute roll and write game with cats? Yes. And so Cat Cafe from Alley Cat Games, it's only $16. You're going to get $16 of fun out of this one for sure.
Oh my gosh. I had heard about this one. I think I saw some pictures online about it, and it looked super cute. I myself am a dog person, but this I would be willing to give it a go. My dogs would forgive me.
Yeah, I think they would.
All right, well, we're jumping in from cats to pipeline? That was terrible. Okay.
Yeah, that wasn't even a segue. Like, there's not even something to make fun of there, because that was just the absence of a segue. Not even an attempt.
My friend has a cat named Piper.
Wow.
Okay.
Why don't you describe the game, Mandy?
Yeah, we're just going to cut that out. Okay, so Pipeline, designed by Ryan Courtney. Art is by Ian O'Toole, and it's published by Capstone Games. It plays 2 to 4 players in about 60 to 120 minutes. Retails for about 65 Canadian and 65 US. I believe this is available now. I know it wasn't available for a while, but I think it's shipped out, so you should be able to get your hands on it. Pipeline, as the name suggests, we're going to be, talking about oil and refining it and that sort of thing. This is definitely an economic type game, and oh boy, I've got lots of things to say. So we're going to jump in. The game, obviously, to get points, but in this game, it's money. Money is what you need to acquire in this game to win, and there are a variety of ways to do that through refinement of your oil and really building a nice pipeline system. The game is played over 3 years, so there's 8 rounds in the first year, 6 rounds in the second year, and 4 rounds in the final year. That sounds like a lot. It's not, okay? But I've played a lot of heavy games. This one, I was like, oh yeah, you got lots of time. Yeah, you'll see. So in each round, players take 1 turn in player order, like literally 1 turn, okay? And it's comprised of 2 phases. You get your work phase, and this is where you're going to take some actions, and I'll tell you a little bit about those. And then we have a machine phase, which is where you've built a machine on your pipes, and this will allow you to run that machine, but at a cost. Everything costs money in this game. So you gotta spend money to make money, but don't spend too much money or you'll have no money. Yeah, that's the type of game that we're playing with here. Okay, so we talked about the 2 phases that happen, and you're not obligated to do it that running your machine phase, but obviously it behoove you to do that sooner rather than later. At the beginning of every round, so after the first year, so the second and third year, you're gonna refresh, because a lot of the stuff in the game you're picking up, like picking up tiles to make your pipes, some of the tokens that are in the game are not refreshed. It's only when that new year starts. So before I get too ahead of myself here, let's talk a little bit about some of the actions. I'll keep it quick because it is a lot to talk about, even though they're relatively simple. Every player gets their own board, and this is where you're going to track the movement of your resources, so to speak, okay, which is technically will be your oil in this case. And you want to kind of push them forward, and you create them by, running it through your pipes. Right? So you want it to push up to kind of refine this oil that you're making and get them to a certain level. And then and once you've done that, then you'll be able to fulfill potentially contracts or orders, which are looking for different levels of oil. Some are high quality, mid quality, that sort of thing. And you have to pay attention to those because that's how you're going to get money. Money. In the work phase, so this is where you're going to be able to take a main action and possibly a secondary action. And again, if you want that secondary action, it's going to cost you. All right, so it does get expensive. So in the board, you have 4 like a quadrant areas of tiles, and these are the different pipe tiles that you can take to make your network. Again, having to pay for them, but that's an action. And then in the middle of the board, there are kind of like 1, 2, 3, 4 tiles that you can take the action on it, and it also has a symbol that can actually change the turn order if you take one of those actions, or kind of the main actions. And then if there are any actions beside them, like visiting the refined market, which will allow you to buy some oil, or visiting the crude market can also allow you to buy some resources there as well. You can take those as secondary actions because they are adjacent to the primary action. However, getting tiles off the board, well, if you do that, that's the only action. Or if you're running your pipeline, that might be the only action you can take because there's nothing adjacent. You can also buy more things to hold your oil when it comes to your board. And also there are machines that you can buy, which will, like I said, you can run those in order to push your oil up the ladder. So the worker actions, the main ones are on the board. We have the refined markets, and these are the 3 different types. The cube colors are orange, blue, and gray. And this is where you can buy it, but you could also sell to the refined market, so you can make some money selling it to this market as well. But there's a limited amount of spaces that you can sell to or even buy from. It increases, the price increases, and it can be very expensive. The crude market is another market located at the top of the board, and some of the prices are lower here if you're trying to buy some of the oil. I find that one's really beneficial, but you have to pay attention as to which type of oil you're selling because sometimes it's cheaper in the crude market, sometimes it's cheaper in the refined. So these are things to consider. Contracts and loans are another action that you can take. These are great because every time you complete one of the little symbols on it, so if it has a droplet that's full, it wants like high quality oil for that one, and then it might have a droplet that has a little bit on it and that's maybe like a lower level. So you basically need oils at those levels that you can take off your board and say, hey, I can fulfill these, and for each one you do, you check your board and it tells you how much it's worth, and that's how much money you get in order to complete that contract. I don't like taking loans, but yes, you can take a loan in this game. And let's be honest, there have been a few times where I've almost broken that rule of not taking a loan because I've been pretty destitute. So this is another option that you can do. Something to consider with contracts, you can defer them. You can have a contract that sits at the top and then doesn't come down to the following year. You can't work on it, but then at least you're not losing points. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I forget to mention that? If you don't complete contracts by the end of a year, you lose points.
Wah, wah, wah.
So you gotta be on top of it. A little different than orders. Orders you need to be able to complete fully when you take them. So that's something that you want to take a look at. And I underestimated orders because orders really drive this game, I find. Then we have tanks and pipes, and these are how you're going to get pipes to kind of create your own network. So you want to try and create a long line of blue pipes or a long line of orange or a long line of gray because that's how you're going to push up the oil on their tracks. Machine and pipe, same thing. You can buy more pipes. Machines are great because you can run multiple pipes at the same time. However, machines can cut up the length of pipeline that you have, so you really have to start that early. We'll talk more about that later. Upgrade cards. Don't ignore these. They're great. I had one that pretty much gave me pipe. I think it gave me pipe cards like at the beginning of every year, which is great, so I didn't have to buy them because it gets expensive. And then I had another one that added like a virtual pipe. So every 4 pipe connections I had, it gave me another one, which is great, which means I could actually push things up more than once on the track. Upgrade cards are great, and they go through 3 levels that you can upgrade them to. So we talked about running your pipeline, so you can actually just take your worker, place it on your area, and run one specific from tile. So if you have 2 pipelines that are running on a tile and you place your worker there, you get to run those pipelines. I think I've covered them all.
Okay.
Hold on. I'm like, there's so many. I want to make sure I didn't miss it. I talked about contracts. Yes, that's it. So once the game is over, once all players have taken their final turn in the end of that last year, I think it's 4 I said there. And then after that, you're basically going to count up contracts, oil barrels, so any oil barrels that are remaining on your player board, and there's a little chart that tells you how much they're worth. Your pipelines evaluation, again, how much they're worth based on how far you can take your oil up that track. Valuation cards they're like objective cards. So basically, it looks at some similar things like pipelines or specific colors of barrels and things like that and how much you have. Penalties for those contracts potentially that you didn't finish. You can take a penalty, and then cash is added. So everything is basically liquidated to cash, and that's player with the most money wins. That actually isn't hard. Like, the actions are not difficult. This game is so tight. And I find it hard to explain this without it sounding like, well, maybe you're just bad at it. Sure, I'll be the first one to tell you, I'm horrible at economic games, but I still enjoy them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I always want to have that, oh, what can I do next? Oh, okay, no, I didn't do this right. I really want to have that feeling. Mm-hmm. And I felt frustrated with this game a little bit. I feel like it was too abrupt. I don't think it's long enough.
No way.
I don't think it's long enough. Honest to goodness, I feel like and it's funny because I played this with a few people and we all had the same feeling. And I know other people have felt this as well. I think it needed to be a little bit longer. I'm not taking a ton of time. And I'm not saying you need to have an engine up and running and I'm making all the money. That's not the point. It's really hard. Like, you have to get established in this game very early. It's punishing if you don't. And it's really hard to come back from it. And I feel that in order to have a proper system kind of set up, you need just a little bit more time. I played this game a few times now, and I've played with people who are actually very good at economic games, and even they were struggling. Okay. And they're like, they don't mind the struggle. But it was like you just never had the opportunity to get off the ground. Interesting. It just needed to be a little bit longer in order for you to do that. And sure, you're not going to be rich, but just to kind of get your bearings. Mm-hmm. So that was the biggest thing. People felt the game was just very abrupt. I did have some issues with the rulebook. There were a few things that were not clear, especially when it came to, I think it was scoring and a couple other things, which matter. I think it was completing contracts or orders. That's it. Orders are nowhere listed like on the board. The tile actually just says contracts. I think it's contracts and loans.
Okay.
Orders are nowhere to be found. So it's one of those things like you had to go looking for it. Okay, had I known this, okay, yeah, that makes a big deal, how they're processed. Long story short, these sorts of things need to be on the board. 2-player count. So I played with 2 players at one point. There's nothing in there to tell you how to set up for 2 players.
Is it different, though?
Nothing. It is.
Oh, really?
You have tiles. So basically, they're just expecting you to go through, oh, this tile. They show you like a few things, but there's no actual like wording to say, this is the setup for 4. So for 2 players, you would do this. So what happens is you end up covering a whole bunch of spaces on the board, but it's up to you to figure it out.
Really? Huh.
There's a few little pictures, but it's not, honestly, there's literally no writing unless I completely missed it. And I played this a few times. So I found that a little frustrating because we had a couple tiles where like, is this right? Like it doesn't make sense, but there's no clarification.
Huh. Interesting.
So something, maybe a lot of you haven't played with 2 and won't play with 2, but that's something to consider. Stuff like that, just write it down. It doesn't hurt. They explain some things very well, and then other things are just not there. That to me was a big one.
Okay.
Coming back to the machines in the game, this is the kind of thing for, so I tested it both ways, tried it early in the game. Definitely don't get a machine late in the game. You will screw yourself. I'm telling you right now. It's one of those things it's really hard to get back from because it cuts your lines. And now what you've had a 12 line, you've now cut it into maybe a 5. So these are things to consider. And you're right. It's one of those things to plan early, but if you've never played this game before, you may not know that. You don't know how it works until you actually see it, and then you're like, so it's one of those things you have to know early. So this comes back to some other games where they kind of suggest maybe you might want to consider doing XYZ first for this reason. I feel like this is one of those games that might benefit from that. I'm not saying you have to do that, but kind of gives you like a guideline for your first game, because someone who's played this game a lot would know. So I have mixed feelings about this game. I actually thought the theme was different. I liked the economic aspect of the game. I like games that run a little bit tight. I just feel like this one was too much on that end and needed just a little bit more time to become established and understand. Punishing is fine, but punishing to the point of like, okay, what just happened? That's not good. So I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's a slightly confused game in the fact that I think it needs to be a little bit longer so you can be established instead of just cutting you off before you can start. So maybe people are better at it than I am. I'm not disputing that, but I also played it with people who are much better at these games than I am, and they had very similar comments. Overall, it's actually not a super, super heavy game. It is a little complex trying to get your system, like I was saying, generating so you can make that money and get that rolling. That's the difficulty, but the actions themselves are fairly straightforward. I don't know how I feel about it. I feel like if it were better instructions and rules when you're playing with a different player count, and I think that if you had just a few more turns, 2 or 3, I think would do it. I think that would kind of give you something to kind of get your feet kind of settled on the ground. Okay, even if you didn't do amazing, you still felt confident. Okay, I did something, and I didn't get that. That is a Pipeline.
Alrighty. It's interesting because something you said just made me think, well, what if you house ruled the number of rounds you did? And I think that would be an interesting victory points topic in the future. Is house ruling games, because I get to play enough games that I'm not, unless I love everything about the game except one small thing, I don't know if I'm going to invest the time in coming up with a house rule. The game's got to really play fairly strongly for me out of the box with the included rule set for me to want. So when you're talking about like, well, maybe if you just added a few more rounds, I thought, well, maybe if you house ruled it, but then I'm going, well, no.
Right.
But I just took a note. Do a house rules victory.
No, that's great. So, and like you said, I have a lot of games to go through. So this is one of those, if I have time, but it is what it is.
Well, that was Pipeline. I play a few RPGs. Not as much as I'd like to, but I'm by no means, I wouldn't define myself as a role player or anything like that. Not anything against role playing even. It's not where I choose to invest the bulk of my time. But when I do get to RPG, I really enjoy it. I have an ongoing campaign with my friends Sean and Alex from the Dukes of Dice and Linz and Aaron from Boards Alive. And we don't get to meet too often, but when we do, we have a really good time every time. And that was partly why I was interested in Icarus when I saw it at Gen Con from Renegade Games. This is designed by Spencer Stark, and I believe Spencer did the art too. It retails for $35 in the US, which I think is very reasonably priced. It's mostly just a deck of cards, a small booklet, and a bunch of dice. a bunch of custom dice that are pretty chunky, which is a good thing. We'll talk about that in a second. Icarus is a GM-less, a game master-less storytelling game, or RPG. And I'll be honest, I'm not deep enough in the RPG world to know if there's sensitivities about what gets called a role-playing game, what gets called a storytelling game, that kind of thing. I went through the experience, and ultimately it felt like a role-playing game to me. It felt like a one-shot role-playing game to me, so that's probably how I'll refer to it. But I feel like this is very approachable for non-role players. So let's talk about it a little bit. Icarus is the whole game, no matter what scenario you play, it's ultimately about this great society, this great city of Icarus falling, which it really starts off. I mean, that is the game. It's about this society failing, which is a bit of a downer in some ways, but it creates drama. And the booklet itself has a number, I didn't count, but a number of different scenarios and settings. And the one that we ended up playing was on Mars, I believe. It was a planetary setting, some foreign weird world that you were executing the story on. But they had settings in the jungle. They had settings in ancient history. They had all sorts of settings kind of outlined in this book that you can pick from. Or I'm sure you could create your own too. And the game has different cards for a number of different things. Traits of some sort. The city will get some kind of series of traits around diplomacy or religion or energy or education or agriculture. There's a fair number of them. And you will pick basically one per player. There'll be some kind of trait. And then you get one that's a negative. The one that's left over that isn't selected gets to be a negative in the city, which I thought, a weakness in the city, which I thought was really interesting. And then you get a motive. So it's not a trait, a motive. Each player gets a motive. So something you're trying to accomplish. It's publicly known. This isn't secret. Whether you want the city to succeed or whether you want to get rich, that kind of thing. So you have, the city has traits, you get a motive, and then you have this deck of, I guess, events or incidents that will have things like a commodity in the city that everybody uses has disappeared. Well, what was that commodity? How did you use it? What happened to it? What are the people doing about it? Are they hoarding it? Are they trying to generate it? Like, how does this impact the world that you've built? That kind of, those people are protesting. There's all these different incidents or events in this deck that you shuffle up and they'll come up randomly that you have to face with. And then in the box, there's a pad of paper. It just says the word like aspect on it. It's your aspect sheets. Trust me, y'all can grab any index card or pad of paper you got loose and do this just fine with. But they do include the paper for you to write on. And you get this setting, you get your motive, you get the traits of the city, and then you're dealing with the events. Well, how do you deal with these events as they come up? Well, it's these aspects. And this is really the role-playing element coming into the game, because the aspects can be anything. Anything that your imagination on how you want to deal with changing or supporting these events that come up. And I had a strength of communication, or the city had a strength of communication. Well, what was the aspect? How did you adapt that? Well, for us, we ended up saying that in this world, people have evolved so that their face shows what they're feeling. There's color changes in your face. So no matter what you say, these color changes reveal what you're actually feeling, or what you're actually not thinking specifically, but they know your emotions on it. And that's completely stolen from a fabulous book called A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. Completely borrowed or stolen from that book. Okay. It's not, but it was an interesting thing to introduce to this world and for us to have to deal with. Okay, well, how do we do this when you show? And then it got into this whole thing. And again, the setting is just Mars with these traits. Then the whole story evolved where some people have evolved to suppress their color changes so that all of a sudden these people could lie when other people couldn't. And what does that do? It was cool. And that's just all things that evolved out of the story organically as we were doing these aspects. Well, then aspects get played out, and then you can either try to support it with a die or promote it with a die. And so you put a die on it, one of these special custom dies that have 4 fails and 2 successes on these 6-sided dice.
Oh my goodness.
And then you roll these dice to see if that aspect you promote will succeed or not. And if it doesn't, you stack the die in a tower, in this just long single column, because that's what Icarus is built around, this monument. And so there is a weird dexterity thing involved, because when that tower falls, this city fails and the game is over.
Oh, I like that.
It really worked. And if it succeeds, great. And it's a role-playing game, so it almost doesn't matter if it fails. And that's why I don't get upset about all the fails on the dice, because it's about telling a story. And sometimes bad things happening are more interesting from a storytelling point of view than good things, right? So you're doing these aspects. You can change aspects that have been played before. You can get rid of them. You can add new ones, all this kind of thing. And again, that's all just coming from the players talking. And then you stack the dice, the tower falls, the game is over, and then you spend 2 hours talking about the game you just played for 2 hours. It's just how these things work. Like any RPG, it will depend on your experience with who you're playing with. I was playing with Lindsay and Aaron, who happened to be visiting me, who are people that I like very much and trust very much. So weird things weren't coming up, and we had fun, and we rolled with changes that somebody made that we weren't expecting, and it was a very comfortable group of people to play with. And I had a blast. I had so much fun playing it. The mechanisms were simple enough and direct enough that I feel like even if I hadn't had role-playing experience, I could have had a similar gameplay experience just from the rules and things like that. And I love that. I love that there's no GM. I love that everybody got to participate on an equal playing field here and engage equally in the gameplay. And overall, I thought Icarus was a really big hit. Now, my things about Icarus are, it is inherently negative. Like I said at the top of this bit, it is about the city failing. All the deck of cards, I forget, like the cards, the events that happen are seeded into like 3 levels. And then the last card you hit is the city falls. It is inevitable in this game that the city will collapse. I don't have a problem with that because, like I said, that creates drama, that creates interesting storytelling moments. But it's kind of a downer in some ways. But it was certainly entertaining. And then what I will share about my experience is that we played it out, we had a great time, but afterwards we stopped and we said, look, what did we fall prey to that we could have been more creative about in being positive? So even though we're marching towards the city's end, we felt like there were things we could have played differently and addressed aspects that were coming up differently that would have been a more positive, a more empathetic, a more kind approach to some of the challenges that we faced. But even that debriefing and analysis was entertaining and engaging, and we had a really compelling conversation stimulated by our gameplay experience. And I think there is tremendous value in that. Icarus from Renegade Games, this storytelling or RPG that really, if you don't RPG, I think you could give a try if you feel like you have a group of people that you would really have a fun time doing that kind of thing with. I had a great time, and I look forward to trying a different scenario in the future.
So this one actually made it to my shelf because of, and I'm not name dropping, I'm just saying it because of his background with these types of games, but Ivan Van Norman from Geek and Sundry. And if you know who he is, he has done a lot of shows, I believe, or has some background with, role-playing games, that sort of thing. And I think potentially may have had some insight on, is it Overlight, potentially? I'm not sure if he worked on it or was prominent in playing that, Kids on Bikes, and I think he does his own as well with the team. And I said, I would love to get more into these sorts of things. I used to do it a long time ago, play them with my brothers, but it's been years and I just don't have the time. And he recommended that I try Icarus. And from what you're saying, it sounds like something that would fit into that kind of nice time frame that I have. And you don't have to worry about having, GM and things like that. So, and the story sounds cool. I understand that kind of negativity that you were talking about, but I'm curious to see how it plays out. And some of the representation, like the Tower of Dice and it falls. It's silly, but I like those sorts of kind of representative things in a game, and it actually contributes to the story. So I'm excited to try Icarus. Sometimes you wish you could go back and turn back time, undo things, mistakes that you've made, and, kind of wonder, how did I get here? If I could undo the things. Well, I'm sure that the Undo series had that in mind for these poor people that, well, perished in these games. So I'm going to be talking about if you didn't figure it out already, the Undo series games. Come on, that was better.
Okay.
I had a story.
Sure. We'll go with
All
that.
right. Okay, moving on. All right. So, Suzanne, you had previously talked about, I believe it was Blood in the Gutter, is the one you had talked about in a previous episode. I've had a chance to play all three, Cherry Blossom Festival, Blood in the Gutter, and Curse from the Past. So, I won't go, this is kind of hard to talk about because we don't want to give away anything, but basically the premise, just a quick recap, is you have a timeline of events that have happened, and you're basically trying to undo actions so that the person who, well, it is pretty straightforward. Someone dies. If you look at the cover of the box, something has happened to someone. And basically you're trying to undo or change decisions in the game to prevent that death from happening. I think a lot of people were confused and thought it was like a choose your own adventure, and it isn't that. You are literally trying to undo decisions that may have affected or contributed to
I feel
this
like it's a
person's,
choose your own adventure.
Demise.
Interesting.
See, and I don't feel it is like that. I mean, that's not how they presented it to me. So before I go any further, I should say that it's designed by Michael Palm and Lucas Zak. Artist is Leah Frochlik and Lisa Lenz, and the publisher is Pegasus Spiel. So when we were chatting about it, they actually didn't say choose your own adventure. They literally presented it as undoing the timeline, so that basically changing decisions so it wouldn't contribute to this person's demise. And I was like, okay, I like that. Versus a choose your own adventure, because in this case, you actually have to choose the right thing or you're going to lead to the exact same thing happening. You need to undo it all, which is literally the title of the game. It rides that fine line, and I get what you're saying. I liked these games. Let's just blow it out there straight out. I liked these games. And Tom and I had a discussion about it. He didn't enjoy them as much. He also said he played them in like 15 minutes, which is malarkey, because I'm sorry.
You may have liked it more than me, but 15 minutes seems really off.
Yeah. It took at least an hour, 45 minutes to an hour per game, which I think is accurate, because I think that's what it says on the box about how long it takes. The first game I played with my friend Ashley, and we're very much into these types of kind of detective, figuring things out. The first game, we just went way too deep. It was like, had an Egyptian kind of theme, and we're like talking history, and we know all the things, and I'm like, okay, I think maybe we're like, it's too much, and we did very poorly, because I don't think we understood properly what we were supposed to do. After that, we were literally at the second highest tier for the games, because we figured it out, and we enjoyed it. I actually enjoyed playing them, and I would play them again. I know you didn't have that kind of connection with them. Tom 100% didn't like them. I enjoyed them. I liked the concept of taking a different path to change the outcome. Undo series, I liked it. Thumbs up for me. If that's not your thing, maybe you prefer more of the kind of exit thing, solving the mystery. Sure, I'm actually better at this than the exit games, believe it or not. So apparently I'm good at undoing bad decisions.
No, I liked it. I liked the one.
Sure.
I only played the one, and I liked it. I didn't.
Right.
You're right. If I had to choose between something like a Deckscape or an Unlock, I would probably go with something more like that over an Undo. But again, like, I put the Undo series in a different category almost. I put it more in like the graphic novel adventure books from Van Ryder Games. I almost see Undo as a card version of that almost. And so I put it's just in a different mental category to me than an Exit or Unlocked. But I'm glad you enjoyed them. And I enjoyed the one I played, and I have the other two, and I'm looking forward to trying them. So I'm glad you liked them so much. And I also like that Tom's just wrong.
I know, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. And this I can actually say with confidence, wrong. And it's okay not to like them, but if you're playing in 15 minutes, you're doing something wrong.
Calling them out. I'm going to go.
So,
I am Tom.
I know.
I'm going to send him a little text right now.
Ding, ding, ding. So that's the I'm just going to say the Undo series.
Well, to wrap it up, I am bringing up ClipCut Parks. This is...
I have a theme song for this.
You do?
ClipCut Parks. ClipCut. That didn't go well.
Oh my God, that was such a fail.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't get it in.
Wow. I'll tell you what, Mandy.
Okay.
You go workshop that a little bit, and we'll try again next time.
I'm going to polish that up.
That was bad.
Crawls away slowly.
Wow. Okay, our theme songless game, ClipCut Parks. from Renegade Games, designed by Sean Graham and Scott Huntington. And the art is by a group called Cold Castle Studios. And this retails for about $25 US. It is an uncommon, or it feels like a unique game. A completely unique game on the market. Maybe I'm missing something, but...
No, I agree.
ClipCut Parks is a game in which you cut the pieces of paper you get. Maybe not like a legacy game, not like even some of the exit games where you have to destroy it. So what you do in ClipCut Parks, it's a pad of these sheets that look like just little grids of different features, red, green, yellow, that kind of thing. And a deck of cards and scissors, little kid safety scissors in different colors in the box. They're so cute, little rounded
edge
tips,
scissors.
Right? Nobody's going to hurt themselves, no lawsuits, right? And the cards are different parks, I guess, that you're trying to complete. And they have different shapes on them, almost polyomino-like shapes. And some of the squares on them have color or an icon, or sometimes squares are connected by little bridges. That means you have to put a piece of paper that's connected there, that kind of thing. And what you're trying to do is cut shapes out from your piece of paper that can fill in the shapes on the card. And it's actually kind of a race game because the first player to complete 5 cards wins the game, which actually may be one of the things I like least about the games, to be honest, is that race element.
Right.
But what happens is you get these special custom dice, and they've got circles on them, and in the circle is a number. You roll the die, and then the number of circles determines how many cuts you're going to make, and the numbers on the die determine how long those cuts will be, how many squares you have to cut through. If I roll a die and it has 2 circles and a 2 in each of them, that means I'm going to make 2 cuts and each of them are going to be 2 squares long. You can't make one cut that's 4 squares long, that's a no-no, but you can make 2 separate 2-length cuts around your sheet coming in from the edge. Now, as you make these cuts, any piece that falls off has to be placed on a card in that turn, or it gets crumpled up into a little ball, and little crumpled up balls are bad.
Yes.
Now, you don't have to cut off pieces every. You can plan ahead, so you're making strategic cuts. You're looking at your cards, and then you are looking at your sheet, and the sheets are different, by the way. And then you're trying to think, okay, I need a red, yellow next to each other, and then I want a recycle icon. Well, those are in the center of the sheet there, so I have to cut that way, but if I cut this way, then that'll make an L, and this will drop off, and that kind of thing. It is enormously spatial. Whoa. Holy wow. This game, if you are not a spatial thinker, you are not going to like this game, flat out. If you are a spatial thinker, it is an interesting challenge, and there's something so permanent about cutting these papers that is scary and rewarding, because once you cut, that thing's been cut. There's no take backsies. There's no erasing. There's no, oh, I forgot to take this resource, I'm going to do it later. There are no take backsies in ClipCut Parks, which I kind of love. I kind of love that permanence of cutting. So yeah, roll dice, cut shapes. Roll dice, cut shapes. Roll dice, cut shapes, complete cards. If you complete a card, you get a little bonus sometimes about like being able to ignore a color match or an icon match or anything like that. And then the first 1 to 5 wins the game. It's very simple from a rules perspective. This was an interesting one for me. I had a couple of friends, and one of my friends hated this game so much.
Really?
Josh.
Oh, no.
I mean, it started off with the scissors weren't big enough for him to cut with, so we had to go find different scissors.
Okay.
But that is what it is. But then, I have little girly hands, so it wasn't a big deal. It just didn't click with the way I think his brain worked. That spatial element just wasn't challenging in a fun way for him. And he, bless his soul, pushed through and finished the game, but he hated every darn minute of it. And it was very frustrating for him. Meanwhile, I'm over there on the other side of the table going, do-do-do, oh my gosh, this is so fun. Click, 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 oops, darn. That kind of thing. Played it again with some other friends, and I've played it solo and enjoyed it much, much more. And I think where it really lands is how you feel about that spatial element. If your brain just doesn't naturally think that way, or if you don't find that kind of challenge interesting, this is a tough one. If you do like it, as I do, boy, oh boy, it feels different. That permanence, that stress, that tension, the forward thinking you need to have, how to maximize if you fail. I'll tell you, those bridges on the cards drove me bonkers.
Yeah, those are rough.
Now, for sure, I think the race element, not sure I love it. I love the puzzly thing, but I think the thing that exacerbates the race thing is that the sheets are different. I don't know how these sheets are generated. I haven't done a comparison to like line them up to see if there's 6 different layouts or if they're all totally algorithmically randomized or whatever, but there are scenarios where I think you can get a card that has a specific demand, like a recycle icon next to a red icon, and they have to be bridged. And then you look at your sheet, and the only place that recycle icon and that red thing are next to each other is in the dead center. Well, that's a really bad mismatch. There's a little bit of randomness in the way the cards come out and then what sheet you get that may not feel like you have, it feels like you're starting at a delay for the race. So I'm going to play around with that a little bit because on a solo challenge point of view, it's so much fun. I love it. But the race element is a little rougher. But I don't care because I think it's unique. I think it's interesting. I love the puzzle element. So for me, ClipCut Parks is a winner. Mandy's theme song is not a winner, but we'll let her work on it and come back some other day.
I'm going to work on it. How practice.
And the other thing I want to address is the lack of reusability, the lack of replayability. You get a ton of sheets in this box. And what I would say is if you play the game enough to go through every one of those sheets, you have gotten your money's worth out of the game.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I haven't unchecked, but I bet Renegade will have a way that you can just buy another sheet set.
Sure,
or something like that. Or maybe they'll even let you download and print sheets at home. I don't know. I'd have to check on that. But I know board gamers are always about replayability. And there gets, like, even the exit games had this sensitivity around. Or legacy games. Oh, you can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. For me, I feel like enough sheets are included in the box that if you play it through all those sheets, you've gotten your money's worth. And then I'm sure there'll be a way to get more later. So that's kind of my stance on the replayability. But you're right. You can't, those sheets are done once you use them in a game. And that is, if that's going to bother you, then that is true too. But I enjoyed ClipCut Parks. Now, you've played it, right, Mandy?
Oh, yes. And there's video evidence of just how horrible I am at it. So I am one of those people that is not very good with any kind of spatial relations and anything. However, I enjoyed the game. If you want to see how I played with a few people, Becca Scott and I think Matt, who works with Renegade, and it was very interesting. And you can see how chopped up my sheet was. There were a lot of balls because it fell off and I had to crumple a lot of things that I couldn't use. But I still enjoyed it. But I understand the frustration for someone whose mind doesn't work that way, and that speed element does not help. But I enjoyed it. I actually really liked it. ClipCut Parks, yeah! See? Better.
Sure.
Time for a favorite segment, I feel. One and done. I feel like
people love this segment.
Right?
People love.
And I don't know, is it because they agree with us, or maybe because we're actually not being like sugary, sweet, and nice, but we're actually like hard to the core.
Who knows us knows we're not sugary, sweet, and nice. But no, I think it's because there's so many games out and there's so many good games. I think people just appreciate filtering information or filtering perspectives, and One and Done does that. So bring it. I see what game you're going to talk about, and I'm torn on it.
All right. Without further ado, I will jump right in with Fuji. That is my choice for One and Done. And before we go any further, just because we say it's a one and done, it doesn't mean that it's a bad game. It just didn't. Something about it didn't work for me. Okay, and then we'll give our reasons kind of behind that. So I do want to make that clear. So Fuji is designed by Wolfgang Warsch. Artist is Weberson Santiago. Published by Feuerland Spiel. And I think Capstone is also distributing that as well.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's who I actually got it from, was Capstone. So Capstone Games. It plays 2 to 4 players in about 30 to 45 minutes. Just a quick overview with Fuji. It's a game that has kind of like these tiles. You have some dice that you're going to be rolling secretly. And the tiles that are cards that are laid out, it's like a volcano type atmosphere. You're trying to escape the volcano. So this leads you to believe that it is cooperative. So you and your fellow teammates need to work together to kind of get to the extraction point before the volcano explodes and hot lava runs over your body and you die. So that was a little graphic, but I think you get the point. And these cards have these dice on them, so it tells you a certain color that it might be looking for, if they have to be even or odd, that sort of thing. And you have to determine if you're able to do that. So in order to move forward and to have a turn, we're going to get into how this can be affected by other players. It's a bit weird, but I'll just quickly give you an overview of that. So in the game, you're basically going to be rolling some dice behind your screen, and they're colored. I think it's like pink, yellow, blue, or something to that effect. And you'll see those on the card. So if you're like, oh, I've decided I'm going to move to this spot over here, it will have a certain kind of number of dice it's looking for. So it might be looking for 1s that are yellow and 3s that are blue. So you obviously want to try and roll a lot of those numbers. So you're like, yeah, that sounds easy enough. We also have planning and equipment cards. And those, so those are the cards that I didn't give the proper terminology. Those are the cards that you're trying to move to. And equipment cards are basically the cards you can use to kind of help you out. And players are going to have their own cards, but there are some that allow you to swap and help out with your dice rolling. You can re-roll your dice again if you're not getting them, but you're limited to how many. And they talk about movement and stamina, moving your meeples and losing stamina. I'm going to talk about the dice before I go any farther. So when you're rolling these dice, you're like, yeah, this looks great. I got lots of 1s and 3s from the example I gave you previously. Here's the thing. You now have to see what other people rolled. So basically, they can kind of prevent you from moving. Because once you have all the dice you've rolled, the 1 yellows, let's say, and the 3 blues, you're going to add those all up. So let's say I had 15. And Suzanne rolled, and, well, she had 18. Guess what? Guess who's not getting a turn? Yeah, this girl right here. So I might be stuck. And when the volcano decides to, I might be stuck in that lava. The point is to get out together. Because if I don't get out, none of y'all are winning. Okay? So that is the point of the game. The game either ends in a victory or a defeat. So that's basically what I was saying. You suffer defeat if one of your team member dies. And this can happen in 2 ways. The card you are currently standing on must be flipped over to the lava side due to a volcano eruption. Your stamina marker. So this is the board that measures your stamina. It's advanced into the final stage of the board. And in both cases, well, the game ends instantly and your team suffers a defeat. Boo-hoo, lava's killed you and you're done. The stamina marker is something you have to pay attention to because depending on how much your dice are worth, this can affect your stamina track and you taking actions. Okay, I was looking forward to playing this game. And right off the bat, there was something that put me in a bit of I wouldn't say a tailspin, but I was a little salty. I do not like dummy players in a game. Now, this is I won't get too much into it right now because we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but this is one of those games that falls into, 2 to 4? Yeah, no, it's not 2. It's 2 plus a dummy. And it gives you the option of, do you want the lazy dummy where it's like a little bit of work, roll some dice, add up the dice, it has its own screen, blah, 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 or do you want the like crazy advanced dummy? And that's more work. I don't want either, actually. It's actually a 3 to 4 player game. So right off the bat, that got me a little salty. I don't like that. The game to me seemed rather confusing for what it was. It left me feeling kind of, okay. It was basically it's random, right? You're doing it based on dice roll. You have some cards to mitigate certain actions that you're taking. Great, I need to roll this. If I don't get it, I don't move. Yay. The cooperation was lost on me in this game because there isn't a lot of communication. You can't say what you have behind your screen, right? Even though you're working together. So yes, I get that. You don't want to give away all your secrets. I felt there was no crescendo in this game for me. It continually stayed on a very flat platform. Great, roll some dice. Great, do you have more than me? Nope. Great, I get to move. You do? Oh, guess I'm not moving this turn. And sure, there's a little bit of strategizing of, if you go this way, you might make it faster. If you go this way, you might not make it. Sure. It just didn't grab me. And I think I was really put off by having that, player count was off because I was playing it with 2 at the time. It put me off. And then on top of it, the game just didn't grab me. I didn't find it was enough for me to want to play the game. I could think of other games that do that sort of thing better. And for what it was, it just seemed to be a lot of busy work. Have you ever been in a job where it's like, it seems like it's really important and you're doing all the things and to realize, well, I guess that didn't really, I was busy, but I wasn't really doing anything important. That's how I felt playing this game. So Fuji for me was a miss. I'm not saying it's a bad game because there are people who do enjoy it. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah, and that's okay. And that was Fuji.
Yes.
The volcano
die
rolling cooperative game. Alrighty, for my one and done, I have a game called Vienna. Now, Vienna is a game I imported from Germany, and then I found out later, it's in the US through Tasty Minstrel Games. So, oops, I guess I didn't have to order it from Germany, especially since I didn't love it. This is designed by Johannes Schmidauer Koenig, and the art is by the talented Michael Menzel. And In Europe, it's published by Schmidt Spiel, and in the US or North America, it's Tasty Minstrel. This is a dice placement game in which you are placing dice along this action track that looks like it's thematically it's a road. So it's a road, and you're putting dice out on spaces, and then once all the dice are placed, you go back and you resolve the spaces in order. And ultimately, what you're doing is getting coins, victory points, or these cards. And cards have different icons on them. They're crowns or crosses or something else. I don't remember. There's some essentially majority scoring there potentially as well. I was actually really excited for Vienna because I love games like Francis Drake or Heaven and Ale or even Caylus, one of my all-time favorite games, in which you have these, although Caylus you can go back. But anyway, where you put workers out and you can jump as far ahead as you want to go to grab that important spot, but then you can't go back. So you could be cutting yourself off from a lot of resources or actions or things like that. I love that mechanism. And I was hoping Vienna would be a very simplified version of that, a game completely centered around that kind of action track without everything. Because Heaven and Ale is a bit of a heavier game. Francis Drake is a bit of a heavier game with a lot of other pieces going around that action track mechanism. So I thought, oh, great, Vienna looks like it's a game just centered around this core mechanism. Maybe it's a lighter weight version. Maybe it's a great introductory game for that kind of mechanism. So I was excited about it. The other thing it has is those cards that when I just looked at the pictures, they were reminiscent of cards in Tiber the Builder, which is a game I really, really enjoy as well. So I thought, oh, maybe I've got this card thing going on, and then I've got this action track thing. I'm in. So I ordered it from Germany, and, it plays out that way. You get your dice, and you place dice. To place a die, it has to match exactly the number on top of a space, and you can combine dice. So if a space has 12 or 9, and you can use 2 dice to get there. And that's great. I really don't have a lot of problems with that. It did feel limiting at times, but it is what it is. And I felt like technically it worked. You're putting dice out. Some spots give you victory points. Some spots give you coins. Some spots will give you those cards that you need to score. And then at the very end of the track, there are scoring spots. So you have to claim it in order to score something. So if I've been saving up crosses and then I activate that spot, I can score crosses if I have the majority. Okay, fine, whatever. I mean, ultimately, it's fine. It was boring.
Oh.
It wasn't simple. It was boring. And there was maybe a little bit of tension in getting cut off from spaces or getting cards. It felt a little random in if you're fighting for crosses and there's a card, the card market has a card with crosses, but your dice don't let you get to one of the spaces where you can get a character card, you're cut off from it. And that felt frustrating. Maybe it was too simple. I don't know. It was just a slog. We kind of pushed ourselves to play through the whole game just to see if there was something that popped at the end. There wasn't. I love the idea about a game centered around this one direction action track. I love that idea. Vienna just fell flat to me. Is it a bad game? No. Will it teach you that mechanism? Yeah. Do I ever want to play it again? Nah. I'm good. Vienna, my one and done.
We asked, you answered. It's time to discuss hot topics in Victory Points.
Mandy and I were chatting, and we realized that we both had played games somewhat recently that irked us when it came to player count. And I know I see plenty of people discussing optimal player counts, but what about the other end of that, when a player count on a box just feels completely wrong? Now, you may like a game better at 3 or at 4, and that's fine. But sometimes there are games where it just gets you so much, you feel like the player count listed on the box shouldn't be that way. And so we put that into a BGG post in the Dice Tower Guild about what game have you played that should be listed as a different player count on the box. Now, Mandy, a couple of games that I have played that just stood out in my mind and were kind of an impetus for this question. Whereas I've reviewed on the I think it was a one and done. The Carson City card game. Oh boy. I was furious when I got that game because I brought it to a game thing. I was opening up, I was reading rules, I was getting ready and it says 1 to 6 on the box.
Okay.
Unless you have 4 players, you have dummy players.
Oh, you just...
I mean, I get maybe at 2 if you need a dummy player.
Wow.
Maybe. But if it says 1 to 6 and you need a dummy player up until you have 4 players, No. I was so mad.
Oh, no.
Another game that I played recently, and I'm going to review it, or you and I may review it in a future podcast, is actually the new game called Tukey from Next Move Games, which is a game series I very typically like. Now, Tukey says it plays 2 to 4 on the box. Now, I know you've played this too, Mandy.
I have.
It says 2 to 4 on the box. But if you have 4 players, 1 player sits out every round. And I did not care for that. I feel like if a player has to sit out, then it should have been 2 to 3 players on the box.
Right.
I completely understand the financial reasons. And quite frankly, as gamers, we generate some of this problem or challenge for publishers ourselves by being fairly finicky. Well, if it only says 2 to 3 in the box, I'm not going to spend it because there's not enough value there if it doesn't play up to 4. 3-player games, there are some fabulous 3-player only games there, but there's very few of them because it's such a limiting player count and it's hard for publishers to make money making those games. So I understand the reasons publishers do this. I get it. I understand how we contribute to that in an odd way as well. But boy, oh boy, sometimes you hit those games. Now, Mandy, what about you? I know you've had some too.
Oh, yeah. You say, like, angry. I've just been super salty. Like, these games are getting the triangle mouth right now. You can't. If you see me in person, I will show you my triangle mouth, which means no, we don't do that. Okay? Fuji, which I just talked about. And I think what rubbed the salt in even more was that you had a choice as to what kind of dummy player you would like. Do you want one that's going to make you work just a little bit, or maybe one that makes you work a little bit more? I don't want either. And I get it. Some people are okay with a 2-player with a dummy player. I'm okay if it's just rolling a die and that's not available. That I'm okay with. But when you're actually having to take turns as another person, I don't like to deal with that in real life when I have to do work for somebody else. I don't want that in a game. Okay? That bothered me quite a bit.
And it's interesting because I disagree with you. I think dummy players that add a randomizing element, I guess it depends on the game, but if you're playing a strategy game and the dummy player just throws in something random to exclude or deny, I hate that. Because here you are desperately working up your very clever strategy around all the things that are available, and then just the luck of a die removes your plan. I don't like that at all.
Oh, see, that's the player I like. And for me, it's not even about the gameplay. It's just because I literally just have to roll a die. It's the work.
I got it.
Like, my brain already has to work. Yes, I'm saying this because there are some games I need my full brain capacity, especially if we're dealing with spatial things or economic. I need to focus on that. I don't have time to focus on Jane or Ted or whomever the dummy player is. I don't know where I came up with these names. I was watching horror movies, okay? So, you know what I mean? Because it feels like a horror movie when I have to play with I really don't like it. And that, to me, it puts a bad taste in my mouth before I've even played the game. And there's nowhere that says that. And I get it for marketing reasons. Like, I'm the type of person, if a game says starts at 3 players, I won't buy it because I like the variety of players. I get it. But if it doesn't work, don't put it on the box. Sorcerer is another one. I have a saying, and this is something I've said before, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Sorcerer is a new one by White Wizard Games, and I love a lot of their games. And I haven't reviewed it here yet. I will. In an upcoming episode. I played this game at the higher player count because most of their games are 2-player, in that kind of range. I didn't even get through it at the high player count.
Ooh.
It is not meant to be played with that many players. Like, it's not even that I didn't like it. It's just not meant. It's uncomfortable. And we played it at 2. Much better experience. You can see that it is meant to be a 2-player game. Just write that. I still would buy it at that because I like their stuff. And then U.S. Telegraph, That I don't remember who did that one. I got it through Luma Imports, but I can't remember who publishes it. And this is a rework of a game that's been around for a long time.
Right.
I think Eric had liked the original game, if I'm not mistaken. We played it at 2. Oh, what a snooze fest. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there weren't enough players to mix it up, to make it interesting.
Right. So I was like, oh, my goodness. So I was like, okay, let's just push this along because I was bored. So there was nothing to force interaction. So in that case, it was
interesting.
So it kind of went on the other spectrum. But then say that this game really... Sure, you could play it at 2, but if I wanted a nap, then, I'd go watch Doctor Who or something. Just kidding. Not really. I know. I'm totally going to get emails.
Oh, you're going to get
that.
some emails?
I'm so salty today. I am so salty today. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
And it's interesting because there's the other type of snooze fest, too, with downtime. So a good example of that is Grand Austria Hotel. This is a game where people will often say, I'll play it at 2. It's best at 3. I will never play it at 4.
Right.
Because of the downtime in between turns. That's a different kind of snooze fest than the lack of player interaction that you're talking about with 2. And I think they're both completely viable reasons to not enjoy a game.
Mm-hmm,
and I think that this is definitely where BGG can come into play because they do have a best at rating. So when people rank their games and list their games, what games they have, they can actually say, I like this game best at this player count. And then BGG aggregates that data. So you can look at a game title there and it'll tell you best at. And I always think it's interesting when you look at a game and it has a really wide player count and best at 2. Or best at 3 to 4. And I think that that's a valuable service. I think we understand why publishers feel compelled to stretch the player count on the box, similar to publishers putting playtime on the box, right?
Exactly.
We all know that's
a whole
dicey statistic at best. But clearly, not every game should be played at the player count that is on the box. And clearly there's a diverse number of reasons for why it may or may not work.
I have to interrupt you. There was one I forgot. How could I have forgotten this one? That is the one I will never forget. I played, and I'm pretty sure it was 7. Not Eldritch.
Arkham Horror?
I played my
Eldritch
first
Horror?
Arkham with 7. I kid you not.
Sweetheart.
Oh, it was awful. I literally had like 3 or 4 turns. I'm like, so I can't jump out of a portal. I'm good. I was like, I'm just going to go, check my email. I'll be back. Literally, I had like 30 minutes of doing absolutely nothing.
Been there, done that.
How could I forget that one? Sorry, had to throw that one out there.
Well, we posted this to the BGG Guild, and of course, as usual, thank you so much, everybody who chimed in. You all had your own games that you brought to the table as well, so let's take a look at a couple of those. All right, so let's hear what you had to say and what games you think have the wrong player count on the box.
All right, so we'll start with Matt Romo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I think Space Base should be 3 to 5 players. With 2 players, the red powers are severely limited, and it feels almost like a different game.
Right, and that's what we're really talking about.
Now, if you're in a completely different game, 100%, you have to consider it. I've played Space Base with 2. I didn't think it was horrible. I didn't love it, and I do actually find that it does have a different feel to the game. I would agree with that.
It's a game all about getting resources on somebody else's turn.
Exactly.
Only one
it's very
player,
limiting.
right?
100%.
Gazencha came with a lot of different games, but mentioned that most co-ops that don't rely on hidden information or communication always work or almost work perfectly as solo experiences like Lord of the Rings or Pandemic. So could include that if they don't. But says scenarios for things like Mice and Mystics that work at 6, it's just awkward at 1 because you need that interaction and things like that. And Perfect Sarah agreed. They say, I play mostly solo, and for a lot of reasons, I think all co-op games need to say 1 to whatever player count instead of starting at 2 because it has the capability to play at 1. Please say so, because when they're searching for new games as solo games, they might miss them otherwise.
And you play a lot of solo games, so would you say, I know you're not cooperative's not really your thing, but would you say?
And it's funny, things like Pandemic, I enjoy far more as a solo experience than I do as a cooperative experience.
Okay,
so
really
I agree with that.
All right, coming over to Chem Soldier and again Matt Romo. Wingspan has too much downtime if 5 play, which allows my ADD and OCD to kick in. I think Wingspan should stop at 4 players, too long of a game at 5. And I have to tell you, as someone who suffers from ADHD, yes, I've played this game at 5, and I have to agree, I don't think it should ever be played at full player count. It does tend to pull and drag.
BGG user Blinks says, and this is the other way, right? Here I Stand is a 6-player game. It says 2 to 6. Madness. And same with Dune. It needs 6. So without a doubt, these big games that depend on a lot of player interaction and interactivity, you don't want to play it at a lower player count. And I think that's, we can talk a lot about mismatches on the lower side, but there's mismatches on the higher side too.
Smarty Josh and Chem Soldiers says, Villainous at 6 is way too long of a game. This includes time between turns and the fact that you can theoretically get faded 3 times before your turn, which unfairly advantages characters without start if turn win conditions. Villainous should not ever be played above 4 players. Downtime and fate issues abound. I have heard actually this quite a bit. I've only ever played it with 3, and I thought 3 was good. I could not imagine playing that game with 6 people.
Yeah, I've played it with 4. I think that firmly falls into the just because you can doesn't mean you should. I feel like Dice Throne falls into that category with me. It sings at 2 players.
It is horrific.
It's similar to Sorcerer. It's a 2-player game.
Dice Throne, I have a story. My first play was with the full count. It was awful. It was awful.
Royal Gaviola says, look, that's where my brain was. Dice Throne at 6, free-for-all, was a huge mistake. I didn't even look ahead. Took way too long for what's supposed to be a fast-paced game. It's best at 2.
And then people get kicked out, and they're waiting for everyone else to finish. Anyway, I have so many issues, but it does play much better at a lower player count. GSWP says a lot of games, in particular more strategic Euros, that list 2 to 5 or 2 to 6 should really only be 2 to 4 because they are too long with more and the downtime becomes an issue. And this is a reoccurring thing we hear a lot, especially with Euros. So I'm always surprised when I see one that's like to 6. And I'm like, really?
Oh my gosh.
Caverna is one of my favorite games. I've played it with, what does it go up to 7? I can't even remember. Oh, can I tell you? I love that game. I would never again play it at the highest player count. It's too long. It just takes too long.
Right. I think that's why I admire... Now, Fields of Arla is one of my all-time favorite games. I love that game so much. It is listed as a 1 to 2 player game. And it works great at 1, and it works great at 2. There's a lot of setup in that game, which sometimes doesn't feel like it's quite worth it at 1. But I'll tell you, I admire them for going ahead and just putting that accurate 1 to 2 on the game, because I can't imagine it with more. It would be a nightmare. And it's so finely balanced that way. It's so good because they allowed themselves to tightly balance it for that player count. So it
there's a game that we talked about, Airship Cities, that one, and that's another one that has a 3 to 4 or 2 to 3 kind of player range on the game. And I was like, that's interesting, but can I tell you, much appreciated, because I could definitely not see it working at the other player count. So I appreciated the honesty on that.
And to wrap up here, we have Chris Parker, who says, I get turned off when I see a game that can play a minimum of 2 and has an AI component for a 3rd player. Just tell me it should play with no less than 3.
Oh, I'm right with you. I am there. If you didn't catch that at the beginning, I'm telling you now. Dummy players for me, no, just don't.
I think that, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing the games that you thought had the wrong player count on the box. It was a lot of fun to kind of think through and kind of get our angst out, get our frustrations out.
You want the right stuff, and that really made me think of a song. You got the right stuff, baby.
And one of the other BGG users commented that this is really a first world problem kind of thing. Because, of course it is. Because there are so many wonderful games out there now that you can really optimize for your player count. And, this game is great at 3 and this game is great at 2 and that kind of thing. And absolutely, we acknowledge that. This is not industry-ending problem. This is not a life-ending problem. But we're a board game podcast, and it's fun to talk about these silly things or these irksome things in board games. But absolutely, contextually, in the big picture,
Agree.
it is what it is.
Exactly.
Except for Carson City, the card game. That one is so wrong. All right, y'all. I think we will wrap up this episode of the podcast. We have our email inboxes open. We've gotten a few additional questions. Thank you, everybody. But if you've got questions, feel free to send them in. That is Suzanne at dicetower.com.
And mine is Mandy. That's Mandy with an I at dicetower.com.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us here to listen to us babble about board games for 90 minutes or so. It's always fun. It's great that I get to do this with you, Mandy. I'm so grateful for you and appreciative of you. We have a lot of fun together.
And I for you, so thank you. That's lovely. I think we have a fantastic
group
time.
hug.
Yes.
And thank you, everybody who listens and enables this to happen. It's an honor and privilege, as always. Next episode, episode 622, Tom and Eric will be enumerating their top games that start with the letter G. Or in French, Mandy, the letter G.
Oh, c'est correct, oui.
Yeah, mais oui. Until next time, I'm Suzanne Sheldon.
And I'm Mandy Hutchinson.
And you've been listening to The Dice Tower.
Thanks for listening. Promotional consideration has been provided by game publishers in the form of review copies of games. This podcast is sponsored by listeners like you. Thank you for your continued support. And speaking of support, the Jack Basil Memorial Fund is an organization dedicated to helping gamers in need. Learn more about the fund's mission and how you can help at jackbasil.org. The Dice Tower is produced by Tom, Suzanne, Mandy, and Eric with assistance from Roy Cannaday and Rob Searing. Our theme is composed by Timothy Pinkham and arranged by Matt Bellier, and hosting is provided by Cool Stuff Inc. Let us know what you think of the show by posting to the Dice Tower Guild at BoardGameGeek.com, following the Dice Tower on Twitter, or by emailing us at dicetower@gmail.com. And don't forget to visit the other shows in the Dice Tower Network at dicetowernetwork.com. Until next time, from all the gang at the Dice Tower, have fun gaming. All right, it's that time again. 2 truths and a lie. So we had a long episode, so I think we should just get right to it. So, from the last show, I started off with I had my second Dr. Pepper ever at Gen Con. I like my steak well done, and I can fit 21 marshmallows in my mouth at once. So if you pick that I can fit 21 marshmallows in my mouth at once, that is the lie. And if you did not guess that, are you implying that I have a big mouth? Really?
Well,
okay, maybe I do a little bit, but that's a whole other topic.
No comment.
What about you?
Last episode, I said my favorite place to go on dates was the airport, or a favorite place for dates was the movies, back when I used to do the dating thing, or a favorite place to go on dates was the comic book shop. And the lie is that I like to go to movies on dates. I hated going to movies on dates. I thought movies were terrible for dates because you just sat silently for 2 hours. Yeah, you could go out later and talk about it or whatever. But no, the airport or the comic book shop. Excellent places to go on dates. At least they were back when I used to date. That was a long time ago.
Yes. All right. Well, that's interesting. So now I got some new ones for you, and I thought I'd take a higher road because I want to sound very professional. That was my nasally professor voice, but I don't think it was really working out. Okay, so I like to write with a fountain pen. I like fine point pens, and I would use a quill and ink to write if I could. I know, it's a bit strange this week, but I have a thing with pens, so we'll see. All right, Suzanne, what about you?
I love cruising, like on cruise boats.
Oh, okay.
We've been on cruises.
I wasn't sure what kind of cruising you were. Okay, so on the boat. Okay.
I have been on 6 cruises, and I get seasick.
Okay, so we've got some really weird ones for you this week, so good luck, everyone. There are some hot new releases this week and next week from Renegade Game Studios. Time Chase and Bargain Quest are available on August 28th, and Eternal Chronicles of the Throne and Clank Temple of the Ape Lords are available September 4th. Check out the Renegade Games website for more info.